Soneva Fushi is a luxury getaway on a Robinson Crusoe-type island that is all about promoting the slow life and sustainable living. And one of their biggest assets in this is their resident permaculturist, Garrett, who busies himself running the island's epicentro, growing soil and generally building an extraordinary sustainable ecosystem on this tiny, remote island in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
A permaculturist stands for permanent sustainable agriculture. It was a word that was first coined in the English language in the early 70s, and since then people have realised that there's a need for permanent sustainable agriculture.
And how does that differ to organic agriculture?
Basically, permaculture, we use organic gardening methods within designing our permanent sustainable agricultural systems. And it's not just agricultural systems, we also design for communities. So we incorporate design and a set of principles and ethics for communities to be sustainable, and agriculture is just part of it.
Okay. Yeah. And is it quite similar to biodynamics?
Again, within permaculture we also use biodynamic principles, and you'll find some permaculturists use biodynamics as well. So it's an interwoven design system using what's available and what you feel comfortable with to have systems that, you know, fulfill the potential of being sustainable. Not only for the short term, but for the long term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
With permaculture, the first thing is to be able to think like Fukuoka or Bill Mollison, Jeff Lawton, anyone, you know, who's observing nature and looking at how it works. And because like learning how to grow a plant or whatever, that's the easy part. But if you can think about the principles of how, and the design of how to look after that plant, that's what, you know, permaculture is all about, really, is thinking first. And as we say, we do 100 hours of thinking for 1 hour of work.
Rather than getting out there and just sort of...
And just running randomly around and trying to fight with nature and struggle against it. But, you know, it doesn't always work, but that's why, you know, it's good to practice and to experiment, because eventually you'll end up with a permaculture system that's unique for that particular environment, for that particular plant group. So there's not like one permaculture that suits everyone. Everyone has their own permaculture, but we're all using the same principles and ethics to achieve the same goal of being sustainable and organic, so we're not polluting, we're not harming the earth, and we're just, you know, contributing back to everyone being able to have a fair share. For instance, on this island here, being in the tropics, we're only 4 degrees north of the equator, we have a topsoil layer of probably 1 to 2 inches.
What's underneath your topsoil?
On this island, it's sand. It's you know, calcium carbonate. We're on a tropical coral island, basically. So we have a sand layer of around sort of 1 to 1.5 meters. Then under that we have a natural water lens of fresh water.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, so all tropical islands are sort of built this way. So if you ever stranded, if you dig down a meter, you might have to break through some calcium carbonate, some caltrate, and then you'll have a freshwater lens.
Good tip.
Yeah. Within the tropics and the subtropics, all your nutrient, up to like 95% of your nutrient, is in the canopy. And so therefore, that canopy layer needs to come back down to the forest or jungle floor to supply the nutrient cycle. So therefore, if we take away the fallen trees, the fallen leaves, will have no topsoil build-up. And naturally in nature, it can take, you know, up to 100 years to produce like, you know, 1/2 inch to 1 inch of topsoil.
Really?
Whereas through using, you know, techniques such as no-dig gardens, sheet mulching, we're actually accelerating nature to produce that topsoil layer, you know, much quicker. Within, you know, 6 weeks to, you know, 3 months, you can be creating, you know, really good humus-rich, you know, topsoil layer for plant feed.
And do you think the vineyard is more of a challenge because it's a monoculture and it's planted to, you know, last 20, 30, 50, 100 years, for example? Does that present challenges?
I think if you went into designing or taking over a vineyard, it would be heaps of fun, because there's no need for it to be a monoculture, because by adding diversity to the vineyard, you'll only enhance your end product anyhow, and you'll also increase your productivity, and you'd also end up with greater reward from it, because you would end up finding you'll have something to balance against. Say for instance, if your crop failed in a monocrop, what do? You've gone and put all this effort into developing a grape, and that season you get nothing. But if for instance you were growing lavender or something like that, you've got a processing plant there, all of a sudden you could be doing a lavender oil as well, and it would be beneficial to bringing in beneficial bees, insects, to helping with natural pest control. So if you're thinking of growing a grapevine, you write down, what does that vine need to stay alive? It needs sun, it needs water, it needs nutrient, it needs protection, it needs care, and then work out how you're going to give it to that, and then you start to come up with, running chickens through, for fertilizing, water harvesting for allowing water. So it just becomes this whole continual loop, which is, as we say, we're building ecosystems. So if you look at your vineyard as being an ecosystem, what does it need to survive? Not for now, but as we're saying, for the long term, and to have more than what you actually need is always beneficial, because at least it's going to go on.
And that's real sustainability.
That's real sustainability. So it will last,
Do you think it's easier to achieve sustainability when you've got like a small environment to look after?
Well, you just have to go and look at the Amazon rainforest and things like that. How big do you need? And that's the whole point. We can design systems for small communities of yourself to countries. In reality, if we all take the care to sit down and work it out and listen, all the information's available, because it's being done at all varying scales, from communities to towns to schools to individuals. It's just magnifies the whole time, so it's all doable.
Some people say that there's more life in the Sahara Desert than on some vineyards. How long would it take to actually bring life back into those vineyards?
Well, for instance here, when we're talking about life, to start to make your soil nutrient rich, to be available for plants to uptake the minerals, the
plus
nutrients,
having lots of worms and things like that.
And worms like that. Well, for instance, in 1 month here we've been able to drop our pH level by 1 point through using organic principles of mulching, sheet mulching, introducing organic matter. So therefore, and also developing, probably 10 millimeters of, organic matter, which is like a compost. And as we saw earlier, there's already, and when that is 3 weeks old, that garden bed, and there's already biota in there.
Gosh. Okay.
So it doesn't take long.
Yeah, actually, it can be quite quick.
Yes.
If everybody sort of decided that's what they were going to do, we could change the face of viticulture quite quickly.
Because you can do a no-dig garden, and you plant on the day that you do the garden. So you're doing it straight away. You're producing garden beds now. You don't have to let it sit there for 6 months and lay fallow. You actually want vegetables, or you want plants in there to start helping the process as well. So it's just nature. And as you're doing, you're observing nature, and that's what permaculture is all about. It's observing nature and then working with nature, not against it. And that's what's happened over these years with this broad-scale agriculture. There was no observation of nature. It was, working against nature and not being a part of it, and it's led us to a lot of problems. The saying is, healthy soil, healthy plants. And what's happened with monoculture and the introduction of synthetic fertilizers and superphosphates in the early 1900s, around the 1920s, it sort of took away from traditional sort of farming practices, and it was like a sort of a quick fix, and people sort of said broad scale agriculture, ploughing, turning soil, but what it's actually done is it's led to mass destruction of our agricultural soils throughout the world. And so what we've now been left in a situation where we have very poor soil, and people have been led to believe by just putting man-made fertilizers on top you're solving the problem, but you're not really.
Because it's just salt anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so salination of soils, which in the end becomes unproductive, then leads to deforestation, because people go in and chop down more arable land to try and grow product because their soil's not being repaired. Whereas using permaculture principles and systems, using organic gardening and agricultural methods, using biodynamics, using modern science, we can actually repair these soils and to be productive and to be producing food and sustaining communities. And it's all available. It's just people being prepared to go and do it. One of the principles of permaculture is to maximize the energy of nature and of human. So we're always looking at ways of designing to minimize the input that we have to put in. For instance, with Bill Mollison, his property that he developed in northern New South Wales, he put something like 30 working days into the property, and he's got a full sustainable system over a 3-year period.
Oh, really? Wow.
And that's, as Bill says, we can design sustainable systems for ourselves, and as permaculturists we can then go away and teach people how to think about permaculture, because we know when we go back, all we're going to go back to is an environment where we can go and collect food, and it's fine. And I've done it myself. I went to Europe for 4 years on my previous property and went back home, and after like a week with a machete, I had a table full of food, and it was all back to running.